Animal Land by John Hauge. Chapter 9, Camel Land. Stuart gathered the leading animals together and relayed the story of the man sighting. Everett had heard and actually came out to hear firsthand Stuart's account of the sighting. After listening to Stuart, and after allowing other animals to respond, he spoke. "I will go out and talk to them." This silenced all of the animals. They all couldn't believe what they heard. They stared at Everett and waited for him to repeat what he said. Negotiating with man was against the 4 laws. Charles and Ronald were the only animals not looking at Everett. They were instead looking at Alistar and waited for a reply from him, but none came. Alistar lowered his head and walked off. "I guess it is up to me," Ronald thought. Ronald rose to oppose Everett's intention to talk to man. "We cannot negotiate with man. One can't negotiate away human nature. No animal has ever dared do this." A sense of relief could be inferred from the expressions of the assembled animals, as at least one animal vocalized what they all felt. While they had been won over by the 2 camels on the projects, the fear of man still overrode their complete agreement with everything Everett and Dominic said. Dominic came to Everett's defense and interrupted. "We must guard against this man-hating talk. We animals are better than man and can look beyond our own prejudices." Man-hating? Ronald had to think about that as a label of disparagement. Since when is this bad? However, before Ronald could answer his own question, Everett continued. "I ask all of you here, has man attacked us?" He didn't allow any replies and answered his own question. "No. Since we stopped provoking him with incessant defensive works and inflammatory language, man has kept away. You get what you give." There was a pause. Some animals looked at Ronald, while others, like Ronald, simply stared as Everett's words were trying to be interpreted. Everett was speaking their language, yet the words he was speaking did not make any sense. "Man is evil," declared Ronald in an unapologetic voice. Ronald continued. He turned so that he was not just talking to Everett, but to all of the other assembled animals. "He is preparing an attack as we speak. Just because he has not done it so far, does not mean he has given up or changed his nature. Do you think a gazelle is going to come over to me with a bucket of water and tell me, 'Let's drink this instead of eating me'? Do you think my stomach is going to allow that to happen for very long? No. I'm going to get hungry. I'm going to get so hungry that no amount of water will satisfy. So it is with me, so it is with man." The founding animals knew as much. This is why the founding animals gave us the 2nd law. Everett didn't want to hear any of this. He continued his pitch, again with the inflammatory language. "I know how to negotiate with man. All man wants is peace. That is what we want too. I can make it clear to man that we can live together without the need for another costly war." There was a silence in the assembled animals. Sensing that the animals wanted more reassurance, Dominic broke the silence. "What we need to do is to work more on building walls to protect us. Strong walls. Walls that don't need to be maintained each year." And with this, a new campaign issue was born. Dominic laid out the plan to the others. "We need to build better defenses than all of our fathers' defenses. Defenses that don't need to be maintained each year. With these new fences, we can have an even smaller army. Rather than fight, we can patrol the fence. The fences will be much easier to defend against man. With the newly created by the dam, we can stay behind the fences indefinitely. Everett will meet with man to explain this action and reinforce our message of peace. This will buy us time to build the fences." The other animals grunted in agreement. Ronald was dumbfounded. How can what seems so obviously wrong be so popular? Charles spoke up to support Ronald. "How about bringing Ronald with you?" "No," replied Everett. "I believe a lion would send the wrong message. Too threatening, I think." Dominic summarized, "We all agree then. We will build new fences, and Everett will negotiate with man to ensure that man stays away from Animal Land and Animal Land remains free of man." The argument was lost. The building of the fences silenced any new opposition that the real threat from man could have generated. Charles and Ronald faced each other as the rest of the animals began to sing the Animal Land song. Charles spoke first. "How is it that Dominic and Everett have obtained more wisdom than the founding animals?" Ronald replied, "They haven't. The question is, how have the animals of Animal Land lost so much wisdom since the time of the founding animals?" Mari came over to join the conversation. Ronald was happy that she was not blindly singing like the others. "Hello, Mari. What brings you out this way?" "Elliot invited me." Ronald was a bit disappointed. Elliot seemed to be back in the picture. "I see. How have you been, Ronald?" "Okay, I reckon. It's good to see you again. What are your plans?" "Elliot and I are going to take a walk along the dam." Ronald was disappointed. He thought maybe he could offer a better alternative to Mari. "I see. I was thinking about heading up to the bluff again." "Do you?" Mari interrupted and launched an accusatory question. "Are you taking Stefani?" Oh, thought Ronald. I reckon Mari must have heard about the hyena tots. I'll put her mind at ease. We'll go to the bluff, and I'll convince her that nothing happened." "No, I'm not taking Stefani. I was going to ask if you wanted to go with me." Mari made Ronald wait for an answer. I don't think so." Mari turned and walked away. Charles had listened in on the conversation. What was that all about? Ronald reflected on his ill-fated conversation with Stefani. Moon and clouds. Omega. After the assembly, Everett was parched. He trotted back up the hill to his den. Behind a rock was a plastic bottle. Everett picked up the bottle and wedged it into a V-shaped crack in his wall. The edges of the crack gripped the cap, and as he twisted the bottle, the cap stayed in place. 5 revolutions later, the bottle was open and Everett drank. Fresh water. No more river water. Man has many faults, like a propensity to eat animals, but he sure can make fresh water. No more drinking from the same reservoir that other animals urinate in. This is progress. Omega. Ronald headed off to the grasslands. He needed to work off the day's frustrations, and the gazelles were just the ones to help him out. Unknown to Ronald, 2 others had been watching. With a quickened pace, they met up with Ronald. It was Luke who spoke. "Are you going to hunt, Mr. Ronald?" Ronald saw that it was Luke and Mickey. "I am, my fine young cubs. Would the 2 of you cubhooks want to come?" Luke answered, "Can we, sir?" "Sure, if you don't mind missing some school lessons." "That'd be swell. We keep asking when they'll teach us hunting and stuff, but instead they bore us with more talk." "Talk, talk, talk," Mickey added. Ronald wasn't surprised. The hunting trials that Mari and he watched had basically stopped. Not a priority according to Dominic and Everett. "Well, hunting is not a spectator sport. You learn by doing, not by listening. What about your parents?" "They just tell us to go over the hill and pick up free food from Margaret." Ronald let out a short growl as the words caused a tingle along his back. Mickey finished. "I don't think they want to cross Dominic and Everett." On his back. "Never mind them, let's go." Ronald quickened the pace. "We are hunting gazelle." Ronald's voice dropped low as if gazelles were very close. A short growl as the words caused a tingle along his back. "Gazelles are good at listening and smelling, so we want to make sure we approach in a way to minimize our sound and scent. Gazelles are my favorite due to their speed. A lion who can catch a gazelle is in top form. Zebras are for older cats. They are slower." The cubs were hanging on every word. "Of course, no matter which type of prey we go after, we still are looking for the easiest kill. Don't fret about ending up with stragglers. The slowest of the herd tastes the same as the fastest." Ronald slowed down and the 2 cubs followed suit. "We're getting close." Mickey whispered, "How do you know, sir?" Ronald replied in whisper mode as well with a, "Smell here." Mickey came alongside of Ronald and lowered his head. There were some droppings. The smell was distinctive. There was also another smell of dried urine surrounding it. "This is from gazelles. The more they smell, the closer they are. Soon this will become your favorite smell." "Hey, what about me? Move over and let me smell," chimed in Luke. Ronald and Mickey waited for Luke to smell the area. Then Ronald asked him a question. "Luke, what would you say the direction and speed of the wind is?" "From in front of us. How would I know the speed of the wind?" "Look at the trees and watch the movement of the limbs. Observe how far down the branch bends and how thick the branches. My estimation is that we have a 40-yard wind. The wind carries your scent to the gazelle's nose, but your scent also dissipates as it travels. Luke asked another question. What do you mean by dissipate, Mr. Ronald? Don't worry about the sir and Mr. I am teaching, yes, but we are not in school. Formal speak is for formal settings. A nod from both cubs. Luke, dissipate means to spread out. Your scent moves in every direction, so that over a 15-yard distance it becomes harder and harder to smell it. Beyond 15 yards, an animal can no longer tell there is a cat nearby. The wind delays this, so at 40 yards your scent is still strong enough for the gazelle to recognize that there is a lion or a tiger nearby. This is, of course, if the wind is behind you. The more you maneuver to get the wind in your front, the closer you can get to the gazelle before launching your attack run. So, you can never attack with the wind at your back? Never can be a mighty long time. Let's just say that with the wind in your face, the gazelle can't smell you. The gazelle may be able to see you, though. You've got to balance the two. It's all about detection. You must not be seen, smelled, or heard. I see. Mickey also replied with I see. Luke summarized. Sure, is a lot of thinking and figuring to do other than just running after the gazelle. After some more walking, some gazelles came into view. Okay, which one of you two is going to make a run on these guys? The two lion cubs looked at each other. They both wanted to charge, but neither wanted to be first. Both were thinking that Ronald would charge, and they could watch. You two haven't been listening? Luke took offense. What do you mean? Hunting is not a spectator sport. Luke, you're up. Luke nodded. Okay. The attack runs ran all day long until finally it was Mickey that ended up dropping a small gazelle. Ronald was as proud as if he were Mickey's father. To see a new predator born was exciting, and to think that his teaching helped make this happen was a source of great internal joy. The three ate quickly. There was little left when one of Margaret's horses arrived on the scene. Margaret's horse spoke. There is hardly any left. Ronald shrugged his shoulders. The horse continued. So greedy, Ronald. You should be ashamed of yourself for setting such a bad example to the young. The two cubs watched the remainder of their effort being hauled away. Ronald looked at them looking at the horse. It was a better lesson. Mickey noticed that Ronald was watching him and spoke. Shouldn't we decide how much to give? Ronald smiled. The horse taught a more important lesson than how to stalk a gazelle. He saw an opportunity to combine the lesson of stalking a gazelle with the wisdom of the 4 laws by using his stalking lesson as a metaphor. We are now the hunted like the gazelles, and man is the hunter like the lions used to be. The 4 laws used to always keep the wind blowing in our faces, because whether you are the hunter or the hunted, that is the position you'd want to be in. Luke was trying to understand it. So, we can smell man coming. Ronald turned to Luke. Right. By ignoring the 4 laws, we are allowing the wind to blow from behind ourselves. Luke thought he understood the analogy and chimed in with, so we can't tell if man is stalking us. Ronald was happily impressed and replied, Right. Mickey wasn't understanding the analogy. What does this have to do with my question? Ronald continued. The answer is no. You can't decide because our 4 laws no longer mean what they say. Omega. The jeep arrived back at the bank in the town closest to Animal Land. The men parked the jeep in front of the bank. There at the bank to greet the men was the son of the circus owner, killed in the last war, and the manager of the bank. The two had sent the men in the jeep to Animal Land and were waiting for the feedback on the trip. The jeep driver addressed the son of the circus owner. It all went like you said it would. That dumbbell jumbo saw us and took off running back to the hospital area. The banker turned to the son of the circus owner and spoke. The animals really cleaned your clock during the last war. The son spoke. It's not over yet. I will avenge my father and see to it that those animals pay for their defiance. The banker went to a more serious tone. There are animals all around that have heard of Animal Land. They have talked about escaping and joining Animal Land. We can't have this. Without animals, the circus business will fail, and more importantly, your circus will default on the loans I made to your father, which will cause my bank to fail. Then we would have to earn a living ourselves rather than living off the earnings of animals. Besides which, our children need to see the superiority of man over animals. The son agreed with the banker. He put his fist up in front of his face. I won't let this happen. Ever since I saw my father suffer and then die from the mauling at the end of the last war, I've wanted revenge. The banker interrupted. He was one of 5 that died that day. A very bad day indeed. The son continued, undaunted. His anger had stifled his grief long ago. Plotting revenge has helped me overcome the tragedy of that day. It soon dawned on me, though, that revenge would not be through brawn, but through brains. It has been a long time in the making, but the process is coming to an end pretty soon. The banker was a bit skeptical, but gained confidence from the confidence with which the son of the fallen circus owner spoke. The son's fist opened up and landed palm down on the banker's shoulder. I've got this. You'll soon see. With that, the son turned and got into the back of the jeep. The driver asked, How's the figuring going for the next battle? It is going quite well. Everything has gone to plan. When I'm finished, Animal Land will be a lasting tribute to the superiority of man. The driver asked another question. What do you mean? Animal Land will be the biggest big top ever inconspicuously begot. The driver didn't quite understand. Rather than let on, he decided to poke fun at the son's confidence. You may be able to lead a camel as if it were a horse to water, but can you make the humped beast drink it? The son appreciated the metaphor. Perhaps not, but do they really need to? The driver looked up and to the left and paused. Then a small smirk formed as he got the meaning. Omega. Stuart walked by the hospital area. He had heard of it, but had never had the time to see it. A chimpanzee came up to him. After a moment of reflection, he realized that it was Charles's son, Eli. What seems to be the trouble? Nothing. I just wanted to see the hospital area. Are you sure nothing's wrong? How about I go through the list of covered items? I'm sure you'll find some kind of match. I don't think so. Stuart walked on. There were a lot of animals, he noted to himself. He wanted to learn more and got the attention of one of the animals who looked all right to him. What's ailing you? Oh, I'm not sick. I'm the dietitian. I'm in charge of making sure each animal is fed a nutritious meal. Stuart nodded and moved on. He walked up to another animal. What's ailing you? Oh, I'm not sick. I'm the benefits animal. I'm here to make sure the patients understand that it is Dominic and Everett who have built this hospital area and who have given all animals a chance to live longer and happier lives. Okay, moving on to another animal. What's ailing you? Nothing. I've been looking for my mate, but haven't found her. How long have you been looking? A couple of days now. Stuart continued his search. How about you? What's ailing you? I've got a weak hoof. Sorry to hear about that. Hopefully, they'll get you all fixed up so you can leave. Stuart watched as a puzzled look formed on the animal's face, but it was nice to find at least one animal that was injured. He then heard a voice coming from behind and to his right. Stuart, is that you? Stuart looked over the small rock divide and saw it was Willard. Stuart, never thought I'd see you here. Stuart quickly corrected the record. Take a good look because the image is going to fade away pretty darn quick. I'm just visiting. That's too bad. The young chimps are doing another play that starts soon. They've been great entertainment. All of the patients love it, and it is great fun for the young ones. They've gotten better and better since the hospital area first opened. Stuart didn't quite understand the connection between putting on shows and treating injuries. So, am I to understand you and the others here sit around? And watch shows regularly? Willard, not picking up the judgmental voice the question was delivered in, replied, Oh yeah, recuperating can be rather boring. The shows help break up the day. The show today is supposed to highlight the important role camels played in the establishment of Animal Land. There is so much wrong with these shows. I'd better leave before I get angry, Stuart thought to himself. Here he is. The voice somewhat startled Stuart, who didn't realize he was lost. Another Dr. Chimpanzee came up. You are the animal that doesn't think anything is wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with me. I'm just looking around. See, it's just like I told you. Elephant, what is your name? Stuart. Well, Stuart, we can help you. Help? Help me with what? It's called UIS, which stands for Unknown Illness Syndrome. It's where sick animals don't consciously know they are sick, but subconsciously, they walk to the hospital area. In an earlier day, he'd wait for the chimp to break down and smile and fess up with the punchline of the joke. Unfortunately, those days are gone, and this wasn't going to happen. Stuart turned away and left the hospital area. He had seen enough. Omega. Stuart was happy to see Ronald again for the groundbreaking on the fence project. It was getting routine. Dominic and Everett would talk, and he and the worker animals would start to do the real work. So much for going back to a normal life, Stuart thought. Although, at last I can get back to working on defense, he thought to himself. The new walls would not be made from earth and wood, though. Out on the farthest frontier of Animal Land, a cache of sunken iron rods was found by Elliot. These rods would be sunken into the ground to form a perimeter of Animal Land. The metal wall should last beyond the life of even the youngest animals. Joining Stuart and Ronald was the next generation of animals. They missed out on the dam project, but were now excited to be a part of the latest Dominic/Everett project. Ronald looked over the new team assembled to form the wall. He thought it was unusual. What about the military training that all animals were supposed to complete before going off on such projects? Ronald asked one of the new tigers. What is your name, partner? I'm Bernie, replied the tiger. Bernie? My parents were big fans of Bernard. How come I haven't seen you out hunting? You know the first law is that all animals must defend Animal Land. How can you defend without good hunting skills? Bernie was unfazed by the assertion. With the wall, we ain't gonna 'cause man ain't gonna be able to get up and over the wall. With the dam, we can live behind the wall as long as we wanna. Ronald was a veteran of the last war. He knew all too well how effective this wall would be. This here wall will only slow man down. There will still be a battle. That's not what Everett says. Everett says he's given us peace with words, and this wall will get the peace kept by stopping all attacks by man. The sureness of someone who never had seen a battle against man surprised Ronald. What are they teaching the young? Part of him didn't want to hear the answer, but he asked anyways. What are the 4 laws? Bernie hesitated. They're wrote in some canyon somewhere. Not where, what? Tell me what the 4 laws are. Bernie didn't understand the importance of having to tell Ronald. Everett said that there ain't no need to memorize them. We do know all them words of Bernard's speech. Do you want to hear those words? Ronald knew the words as well, but wasn't as interested in them. He tried one more time to reach the tiger. Don't you want to know the words of the founding animals? The old days of struggling to survive ain't no more. We're in a new day of peace and plenty. Bernard set the vision. Dominic and Everett turned the vision into reality, and my generation is gonna live it. You know the hospital area, the dam, and now the new wall fence thing. That's what's important. Ronald paused before responding. It wasn't that Bernie didn't know the 4 laws that shocked him, but it was the conviction and belief in which the young tiger spoke about how unnecessary knowing them was. When he was in school, the founding animals were the most revered animals ever. The stories about how the founding animals escaped man's circus and how this had led to the creation of the 4 laws were the most important lessons in school. Now it seems to be how wonderful the creation of the hospital area was, the building of the dam was, and now how wonderful the building of the fence was. That these words now appear to be more important than the words of the founding animals was shocking. Stuart approached and broke up the conversation. I'll have to respond to this misinformed tiger some other time, thought Ronald. Ronald archived a reminder to do so by writing another item on the to-do list that he stored in the back of his head. Stuart and Ronald reviewed the plan for the fence. The first thing was to have the camels and horses dig the trench along the various lines that Everett marked out. Then, the magic white powder would be mixed by the lions and poured into the trench. Finally, the fence would be placed into the white slurry by the elephants. The camels and horses would hold the fence until the white slurry magically turns into white rock. Both Stuart and Ronald agreed that the fence project would be much easier than the dam project. Work began when some young camels and horses arrived and started to dig. Stuart followed the camels and horses and filled the trench section with water from his trunk. Ronald and two other lions then added the white powder and started to mix it with their paws. Unlike the dam project, which had used large mixtures, the fence job was a series of small mixtures. Once all mixed up, Stuart came in to set the fence section in place. The camels and horses held the fence upright, while one of the camels walked back and forth to pace off the time needed for the magic to happen. Ronald and the other two washed the white slurry off of their paws. After the pacing, the fence stood up on its own, and the horse and camel team set off to dig the next trench. It wasn't long before one of the camels pacing the time came up to Ronald with a suggestion. Mr. Ronald, while I was walking back and forth, I was thinking about. Ronald recognized the camel. It was Everett's daughter, Lizzie. He had heard rumors that she was questioning her father's actions. Ronald wasn't sure whether working on the fence project was supporting her father or rebelling against her father. Ronald tried to encourage Lizzie to continue. Go ahead, Lizzie. I'm listening. I was thinking, well, I'm not trying to be critical, you see, it's just that. Ronald thought that she probably didn't have much practice in challenging authority with Everett and Everett's ego as a father. He tried to calm any anxiety. Go ahead, Lizzie. I want to hear. While I was walking, I was thinking. Anne, I was thinking about how I could avoid this walk, but I'm not trying to avoid work, you see, I was thinking. Yes, yes. Spit it out, Lizzie. Ronald smiled at his choice of words, which had an extra meaning when spoken to a camel. Lizzie didn't seem to notice. He prompted her again. What did you come up with? The camel finally built up enough confidence. How about we get some big branches and brace up this fence? That way it won't move after Stuart sets it in place. Then we can just walk away from it, and it'll be all set up the next day. Ronald thought about it. It made a lot of sense. It was nice working with animals that could think, even when charged to do such a mundane task. This is an excellent idea. Stuart, let's get some of the leftover logs from the dam project over here to brace up the fence sections. Stuart answered enthusiastically, sure. After listening to the idea, Stuart had already started thinking about where to get the wood. He knew exactly where to find it. For Ronald, there was immense pride in working side by side with Stuart, who had become a legend in Animal Land for his strength and dedication while working on the dam. While working on the fence, Ronald could forget about the lost political battles. He could be apolitical like Stuart. It didn't take long for this tranquility to end, though. Many of the young animals were losing their enthusiasm for the project. The young lions seemed to be doing well, but the effort by the others seemed to be waning. Maybe he was just biased towards the lions? Ronald thought. One of the colts approached Ronald. Ronald, I thought the fence job would be more supervising and less doing. Don't we have other animals to do the digging? No. How do you think we get things done around here? Well, I'll talk to Dominic. I'm sure there is more important work to be done. Pretty soon, most of the other younger animals left. The remaining worker animals were leftovers from the dam project and a few dedicated young animals. Included among the young animals was the one with the fence idea, Lizzie. Once an invincible force, the generation of animals that should be the vanguard to defend Animal Land had been broken by the dam. Many seemed to have aged twice their years. With the young animals ignorant of fighting skills and now not willing to get their paws dirty, Animal Land is definitely in trouble, thought Ronald. Omega. The sun was up early in Animal Land, but not Everett. After a few days of overcast that seemingly postponed the morning, a clear sky had moved up everyone's schedule. It wasn't just the loss of an extra hour's sleep that had slowed down Everett. Even the mattress, hidden under the straw that made getting up easier in the second half of his life versus the first half, had failed him. This morning, each joint seemed stiff and hurt. When Everett failed to show up for the morning political meeting, Dominic decided to come over and check on Everett. We expected to see you this morning. What's up? aches and pains all over. Not feeling right. Dominic noticed a redness in Everett's eyes of Everett's trembling head. A fever had taken a hold of his body, limiting the motion in his legs. Dominic remembered hearing stories of this type of disease from the early days of Animal Land. It was called man's fever because the illness seemed to come up during the imprisonment of the animals in the circus. We need to get you to the hospital area, offered Dominic. Animal Land needs you healthy. Everett knew that Dominic meant well, but he also knew that the medical chimps were not skilled in treating man's fever. For me to get healthy, you need to help me meet up with Man. Man? Yes, Man knows how to treat this illness. Dominic was not sure about this move. He had always trusted Everett's words, but he couldn't help wondering, why would Man help Everett? Are you sure? Not waiting for a reply, Dominic continued to make his main point. How is it going to look with you not going for treatment at our own hospital area? The hospital area was Dominic's pride and joy. Although he hadn't scratched any earth or gathered any tree limbs, he still felt as if he had single-handedly turned a patch of grassland into the most advanced animal hospital area ever. Well, I suppose our hospital area is good enough for the regular animals of Animal Land. I know the regular animals are certainly much better now than they would be without it. However, for me, I desire the best animal care. For this I must turn to Man. Man has a far more superior knowledge of animal health. This didn't make any sense to Dominic. Everett had spent so much time talking about how wonderful the hospital area was. He didn't want to be critical of Everett, but just had to ask out of a burning curiosity. Why is Man's hospital area better than ours? For the circus to be profitable, Man needed healthy animals. So it was good business and highly profitable to develop advanced medical skills in treating animals. Dominic was even more confused by the explanation. I thought Man was evil and wanted to harm animals. Everett was growing tired of talking because of the fever, but he knew that he had to convince Dominic to go seek out Man if he was to survive. Yes, Man was evil to animals, but only to animals that wouldn't do what Man wanted them to do. Dominic tried to summarize what he was hearing. So, if the animals wouldn't perform as Man wanted, they would be denied hospital services? Everett agreed with Dominic's summary. Yes, there is no difference to Man between a non-performing animal and a dead animal. Both provide no profit to the circus. Okay, I guess I see. Dominic tried to connect the dots in his head. So, if Man is to help you, it needs to be good business? Helping you needs to make a profit. Everett nodded his approval. I supply water from the dam. Man can turn this into profit. It is in Man's interest to keep me healthy. Okay, but let me ask this. If Man's medical services are the best, why don't we bring the technology to Animal Land? Everett was getting a bit worried. Dominic was starting to sound like my daughter, Lizzie, he thought. The dam doesn't supply that much water. You and I are the leaders of Animal Land. As such, we need the best care in order to continue on and help the rest of the animals. Dominic liked the sound of this. It fit with his view of his role. Dominic helped Everett into the back of a cart, and, with the help of some of Margaret's horses, the group headed to the frontier of Animal Land. After some conversation understood only by Everett and the men transferred Everett from the cart to their trailer and left with the ill camel. Dominic was to return in the evening to retrieve Everett and take him back home. Omega. The men returned Everett as planned, along with some pills. A couple of days later, Everett was back on his legs. The amazing action of the pills supplied by Man made quite an impression on Dominic. He thought, how can the animals of Animal Land make these pills? These pills are a marvel of medicine. We need to figure out how to make them. While I was there, I arranged to have Man provide their healthcare pills. Dominic was pleasantly surprised, but also a bit worried about such a quick generosity from Man. Why would Man want to do this? More water? No, not really. Dominic waited, but no more came out of Everett's mouth. His attention waned, and he went back to his main thought. He was most happy to see Everett well again. In any case, it's good to see you up and around again. Now you can make the trip back up to your place. Temporarily. I think it is time to step down. I'm not getting any younger. I think it is time for me to move on to something else. What about the election? I think you should run without me. Dominic had been a half step behind Everett as far back as he could remember. He had not anticipated this move, either. However, taking the position of sole leader of Animal Land wasn't a concept he was going to argue against. Omega. Ronald looked at the horizon. The fence was starting to take shape. He thought to himself, I wonder what man would think about such a structure. His vehicles would have to stay behind. It should be easier to catch him once he's on foot. Coming over the horizon, he saw some movement. Too short to be man. The mystery didn't last long enough to really be a mystery. Charles and his son, Andy, came up to help work on the project. It was a rare day when more animals joined the work. Ronald asked Andy rather than Charles himself. What brings you all out here? Well, it seems every time we seem to harvest a bit extra, Dominic arrives, and we're back to just enough for the next week. If I didn't know better, I would think Dominic is part horse. Ronald laughed and replied, Dominic sure loves them fruit. Andy laughed too, but not Charles. Charles countered, I don't see anything funny about Dominic raising our contributions. Ronald stopped laughing enough to reply, well, partners, sometimes it is easier to laugh than it is to cry. Charles still didn't think any of it was funny. The orchard was just as important to him as his two sons, Andy and Eli, were. He nurtured the trees and spent a lot of his life and effort into making the orchard a primary food supply for Animal Land. In the process, he wanted to leave the orchard for his two sons so that they would not have to work as hard as he did. The realization that this was no longer possible was why he could not laugh. In any case, there really isn't much sense in working the peanut plants and fruit trees. It was a very difficult and emotional decision, but I've decided to abandon them. Ronald sobered up and patted Charles on the shoulder. Well, come on then, partner. The work is winding down, but it has been agreeable. We've finished up the big circle and now are dividing up the area based on animal den locations. Why divide into these smaller areas? Surely the animals of Animal Land don't need fences to protect themselves from each other. Ronald smiled and looked at Charles. Really, partner? Charles immediately saw the foolishness of his question. Well, except for protection from camels, I suppose. I reckon you're right. Anyway, Elliot said that it has something to do with Everett's concept of containing any breach in the outer fencing to a smaller area. I suppose there's some logic to this. Ronald looked at Charles's son, who didn't seem that interested in the conversation. But hey, enough shop talk. Shouldn't you be taking advantage of the free time to try and meet some of those chimpettes? Andy didn't appreciate the comment. I've been working so hard that I haven't had much time for those sort of things. Truth is, most of the chimpettes, as you say, have hooked up with the medical chimps, including my brother, Eli. They've had more free time to court and stuff. Don't they see your qualifications as a good provider? Well, the medical chimps lavish them with the best nuts and fruit from the hospital area food stockpile. This is the stockpile that Dad and I have contributed all of our extra harvest towards. The chimpettes don't know where the source of the food comes from. Andy turned to his father. He was already depressed about the shortfalls of his professional life, and talking about the shortfalls of his personal life didn't help. Dad, can you get Ronald to change the subject? I think I missed the shop talk. Charles obliged. Well, Ronald, I don't see you stalking too many lionettes. Yeah, that's true. There was one I first met in my younger days. But then came the war, and then came Dominic and Everett. Who's got the time? Charles started to laugh. He pointed behind Ronald and looked at Andy. Andy laughed as well. Well, the lionettes may not be stalking you, but you do have at least one female that fancies you. Margaret came up to disturb the guy talk. Hi, Ronald. You are needed on the range. We need more meat to keep Animal Land going. Why me? What about the younger lions and tigers? Margaret squinted her eyes as if Ronald's question was as annoying as staring into the setting sun. Their hunting skills are, shall we say, crap. Better to have some skilled animals hunt and have the others do what they are skilled at. Let me get this straight. They can't hunt. They're certainly not working on the fence project. bring Em out to me, and I'll put the wild back into those wild lions and tigers. Dominic has them working on a special project. Okay, I guess it's not that important to know what they are doing, Ronald thought. Going back to the training statement, Margaret's thought process seemed short-sighted. Ronald challenged the training practices instead of challenging the use of the young cats on some kind of cryptic special project. Not training the young in hunting skills seems a bit short-sighted, does it not, Margaret? Margaret shrugged the question off. I don't worry about such things. Everett and Dominic have got this covered. Wonderful. I'll see you later, Ronald. Ronald headed out to the prairie area beyond the fenced area. He passed through the hunting training area. As he passed through, he reflected that, in the future, there will be no animal that will remember what this area's purpose was. Ronald left the hunting training area and moved out and into the prairie lands. Once in the open prairie area, he reflected some more. He probably had piled up the biggest kill count in Animal Land history, and it had all started right here in this place. There probably wasn't an animal in Animal Land that didn't eat something he'd killed during the time since the end of the war. His body showed a lot of marks from all the hunting. For some reason, the prey just didn't want to lay down and wait for his bite. The hoofs of gazelles cut into Ronald's side, creating some scar marks. Bernard had scars from his war conquests. Ronald was accumulating a pretty impressive collection of scars himself without as much war action. Prey was abound. The wind was coming out of the east. Ronald maneuvered to get the wind in his face. He stalked the smallest one. Creep, 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 and then charge. From the tall grass sprang Ronald at full speed. The pattern of creep and charge repeated throughout the day, but the prey was getting wiser with each attack, and Ronald was getting slower with each attack. After 3 kills, the prey had scattered and moved on. Ronald strolled back to the staging area where the 3 lay dormant. It had been hard work. I don't see why I can't have a bit of a snack before hauling the loot back to Animal Land. Between the eating and the blowing wind, Ronald did not detect the approach of Margaret. Thanks, Ronald. Margaret directed some helper horses to gather the kills. At least Margaret eliminated the task of hauling in the load back to the hospital area food storage area. Ronald thought, how did she know he was here? As Margaret and her assistants moved off, Ronald couldn't help but think of the irony. In the past, the younger animals would provide for the older. Now, the older were providing for the younger. Has the world turned upside down? Ronald rested for a bit longer to let his food digest. He thought about his reality to date. His reality had become a life serving camels and building things that he never wanted, never used, nor would ever use. If man were to attack today, would he have the strength to defeat man? Prey started coming towards Ronald. He thought, maybe I could go for 4 kills? Then, off in the distance, he saw another lion on the chase. The lion overshot a number of times, but then overtook the gazelle. I recognized that lion, Ronald thought. It was Mickey. He headed towards him. Of course, Margaret had reached Mickey before Ronald did. If Ronald was a conspiracy-believing lion, he would hold that Margaret was giving kickbacks to the vulture rabble to rat out us lions and tigers when we make a kill. Only an airborne vantage point could allow such a fast reaction. Ronald slowed up to let Margaret leave before he arrived on the scene. He didn't want to see her again. Ronald kept his vulture theory to himself. I thought all you young lions were working on some kind of special project for Dominic and Everett. They are. I escaped along with Luke. He's still out in the field. Margaret didn't leave much. Mickey continued to eat as they talked. That looks like a pretty good-sized kill, Mickey. Nice to see good education in action. Depends on the education, Ronald. I was also educated on mixing the white powder, but this is not the work for a lion. Unless, I suppose, you want your lions to be more like camels. Both cats let out a laugh at such an absurd notion. Ronald added, Dominic and Everett and their minions can formally teach anything they want to teach, but they can't pry into every den and direct the learning one does at home. Mickey nodded his agreement rather than voicing it, as he was temporarily silenced by a mouthful of gazelle. Ronald continued, We are all responsible for our own education, my young hunter. Dominic and Everett may make it harder, but that is no excuse to neglect learning the basics. That's why Luke and I sought you out to show us how to hunt. I got to get back to find Luke again. See ya. Mickey went off to meet up with Luke. Ronald watched Mickey as he slowly grew smaller in the distance. Ronald was ready to teach his own cub, but that seemed like an impossible wish at this point. Omega. The walk back to the perimeter of Animal Land was less exciting. Rather than the anticipation of the hunt, there was the inevitability of the servitude to the camels. As he watched the fence grow in height as he got closer to Animal Land, he thought about how to defeat it. It would be very difficult for man to breach. It would be very difficult for anyone to breach, but not impossible. Funny though, there was something eerily familiar with the black bars protruding out of the ground. Maybe there is some time to swing by the history canyons before reaching Alistar's den, Ronald thought. The founding animals documented many things when they first came to this region that was to become Animal Land. The 4 laws were the most important, but other wisdom was recorded as well. Ronald remembered visiting the canyons as a young cub and seeing the visual description of the circus days. His last time out to the canyons was for the Bernard ceremony. The animals only went through part of the canyons to see some of the newer additions like the Bernard painting. Upon entering the canyons, Ronald could not find the circus drawings. They have to be here somewhere, he thought to himself. Where are the pictures of the caged animals? Where were the whips? Where are the pictures showing how the chimps learned to unlock the cages? Then Ronald noticed that the walls had clay on them. He scratched the clay away and found the paint. Dominic. Dominic has been here. He had the walls covered in clay to hide the history of Animal Land. This was probably what he was doing during the building of the dam. Dominic commissioned the picture of Bernard. It was still there. It was one thing to add to history and quite another thing to try and erase it. Ronald left to tell his father. His father would know how to react to this. It was too late to talk to Alistar when Ronald finally arrived. The next morning he would. As he laid down, the removal of weight from his paws gave him a dull ache. It hurt less when the weight was off, but rather than an intermittent pain, the constant dull ache seemed more annoying. He closed his eyes. For almost an entire generation there had been nonstop building. Yet, for nearly an entire generation there had not been war. Maybe Bernard was right? He didn't have very much time to ponder this line of thinking before he was suddenly slain by sleep.